Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order on Monday, November 9th, 2020. It's a special meeting. We'll go from 5:30 until just a little bit before 7, and then convert over to our regular business meeting here on this Monday. First order of business, I'd like to call the roll of the council. Ms. Christensen, if you could please.
Thank you. Councilmember Beloga. I saw him unmute, but I didn't hear him. Councilmember Beloga? Am I the only one not hearing him, or is anyone hearing him?
Not hearing him. I do see that he is logged on here. Why don't we come back around? We'll make note of his presence as we go along here.
Thank you. Councilmember Carter?
Present.
Councilmember Coulter?
Present.
Councilmember Lohman? I don't see him. Councilmember Martin?
Present.
Councilmember Nelson?
Present.
Mayor Bussey?
And present. So we have 5 members officially present here at the City Council meeting. I know that Councilmember Beloga is working his way through some technical issues to log on. And so we will move forward with our agenda. We've got 2 agenda items on this evening's special meeting agenda. The first is item 2.1, which is a COVID-19 organization and public health issue update. Dr. Nick Kelly, we've asked Dr. Kelly back once a month to give us updates, and I think the timing for this is perfect because obviously, as we've seen in the news and heard reports, Minnesota in general is headed in the wrong direction with so many of our COVID numbers, and so wanted to get an update as to where we are here specifically within the city of Bloomington. So good evening, Dr. Kelly. Welcome. Thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Chris, can I share some slides?
Sure.
Stand by. We're getting you the ability to do that. There we go.
Can everybody see the slides?
Yes, we can.
All right. The United States is on a dangerous trajectory with COVID-19. We're on track for over 200,000 new cases a day by the end of the year. The map you're seeing shows the majority of the country is in what we consider uncontrolled spread, where we have COVID spreading wildly in those states and very little control of the disease moving in those communities. Here in Minnesota, we're setting records almost daily. We're on an unsustainable rate of case growth in Minnesota. The data in Bloomington is rapidly moving in the wrong direction also. This weekend, we documented 178 new COVID-19 infections in Bloomington. That's the most we've ever seen in a weekend. Our average number of new cases in Bloomington over the last 7 days has been increasing substantially. It's the highest we've ever seen it in this pandemic. As you see in this graph now, we've surpassed the peaks we saw in the 2 previous where we went up the spring and then over the summer. We are in uncharted territory now in Bloomington. Most of the known sources of exposure are around social interactions. We see the majority of these things being somewhat small to large gatherings. Many of these social events are getting together with family or friends, small gatherings inside people's homes or other venues where we're seeing 1 or 2 individuals transmitting COVID to many others. Gatherings of others outside your immediate household in a social setting right now is very risky. Conditions have changed. Many activities that were less risky a few weeks ago are now more risky. This is very concerning given that we're approaching the time of the year when many people gather. Think of alternatives to gathering this year, and we can't say it enough. Keep your distance, keep interactions short, and wear a mask. We continue to see cases go up across age ranges in Bloomington. Thankfully, we are not seeing the substantial increase that we're seeing in our young adults in school, but the fact that we're seeing increases across all age ranges gives us concern. One of the biggest challenges we see is the impact that this is having on long-term care facilities. As we see those cases going up, especially in that over 70 group, our long-term care staff are being impacted in the community. There's too much community spread for them to not get infected and bring it into those facilities. These impacts are going to result in additional deaths in our community. We continue to see a disproportional impact by race and ethnicity in who's getting COVID-19. There's been a substantial increase in cases in our Hispanic and Latino community in the last few weeks. The lack of paid sick time is a huge concern in this community, especially that we're hearing from community members. Many individuals are letting us know that they can't afford to miss work, so they don't want to get tested in case they have symptoms. We expect the continued challenges we're seeing in the disproportional impact to result in additional hospitalizations and some deaths in these communities. The data in the past few weeks is alarming. We're seeing an impact on our healthcare system and know that the impacts will increase. This shows you the data of hospitalizations by month here in Bloomington. We expect November to surpass October fairly shortly. October had our highest number of hospitalizations since this pandemic has occurred. We know on average it takes about 10 days after a case is developed to result in hospitalization. That means the impacts that you're hearing about in the news now are not from our record-setting cases we saw last week. Things are going to get more challenging in the near future. We will see our deaths pick up just like we expect our hospitalizations to pick up. That's a lagging indicator that we will continue to see. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides and continue on with a few more remarks. The last several months have been hard. It's going to get harder. Social isolation, economic impacts, changing routines, and the loss of a loved one, and the uncertainty around COVID-19 are huge challenges. On top of that, many are wrestling with understanding the impact of racism in our community, state, and nation, while others are navigating this pandemic with the burden of racism. This year has been unlike any other year in recent history. This pandemic is not over, and it's going to get harder in the coming weeks. It doesn't have to be this way. We know how to live with COVID-19, what mitigation strategies work, and how to use them. Minnesota has a solid plan, and a dial back seems inevitable. The challenges we're facing now is many are choosing to not follow public health guidance. Like many things, how we respond to COVID-19 has divided our nation, state, and community. We've lost sight of how our individual actions impact our community and that we are all striving for the same goal to get through this pandemic. The path we are on jeopardizes the ability to provide in-person school for our youth, the capacity and type of medical care that we have available for emergencies, the health of our community, and our economy. Our common enemy is COVID-19, not each other. We need to change something so our community understands the importance of uniting around COVID-19. Throughout history, we've put aside ideologic differences for the common good. We must do that now, quickly. As elected leaders in Bloomington, we ask your help in rallying the community around controlling COVID-19. This could be having an intentional conversation with the community about how we come together to slow the spread of COVID-19, or continuing to work on policy solutions to make the future brighter, such as the Racial Equity Business Plan, addressing racism as a public health crisis, and continuing to innovate on housing policy. These actions help the community see the light at the end of the tunnel. Actions taken now invest in the future for a better Bloomington. The city has pulled together resources to help our residents stay healthy and lower the risk of COVID-19 this winter. We have a new website that went out today, blm.mn/winter, to learn more. I spent a lot of time in our city parks this weekend, like I'm sure many of you, with my family. Seeing others providing space when passing, wearing masks while walking in groups, and taking time to invest in self-care gives me hope. Continuing that and using the amazing programs that Park and Rec have set up this winter is going to be beneficial for the entire community. While this winter will be hard, I am looking forward to the distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine next year. This will be another tool that we have to control COVID-19 as we learn to live with this virus. Based on what we know now, we likely won't see a vaccine widely available until the fall for the general public. Until then, we continue to control our destiny by our individual actions for the collective good. Dr. Mike Ryan, who is leading the COVID-19 response for the World Health Organization, recently remarked about how he is tackling every day in this pandemic. He asks himself 3 questions that I've adopted into my daily routine, and I would encourage everyone else to do that too. What can I do to avoid getting COVID-19? Think about the mitigation strategies that we all know so well to prevent you from getting COVID-19. What can I do to unintentionally give COVID-19 to somebody else? Same mitigation strategies play into role here. And then what can I do to be kind? This is how we live with COVID-19. We make conscious choices every day to protect ourselves and our community and show kindness.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Council, any questions of Dr. Kelly? Any comments this evening? I would like to make note that Councilmember Lohman and Councilmember Beloga are with us now, and Councilmember Lohman, I'd like to chime in.
Thank you. I just had a tough time getting in there on the panel there. I was there for a while, but always fun with technical stuff. So yeah, I did have a question for Dick, and maybe it's more appropriately a question for Jamie and the mayor. So what I'm concerned about is we certainly see the peaks that are increasing, and certainly there are those folks who are economically impacted, really, across the different demographics in our city. And when I'm particularly interested, we've done quite a bit of work around those folks who are living in apartments. I know there's more work that needs to be done with that. But for those folks who are, who own homes and that type of thing, what resources are available within the city to be able to address those folks who are economically impacted, by these particular this COVID crisis we've got coming up here, and have been sustaining.
Nick, do you want to go ahead first, and I can jump in after that if you have some reaction?
Sure. As with anybody that has a case of COVID, if they run into challenges, we look at it from an essential service standpoint. They can let us know, and we'll work with them and our partners in the community to make sure that their immediate needs are taken care of. Longer term needs are addressed through other programs that the city partners with through VEEP and other means to serve the community that way.
And that's what I was going to recommend too. Thanks, Nick, is that especially the services at VEEP as people are experiencing economic hardship, whether it's housing instability for renters or, to your point, Councilmember Lohman, if there is economic hardship that is causing food instability too, VEEP is a tremendous resource within our community, and that's available to folks who are experiencing hardship, whether they're a homeowner or a renter.
And I just want to be sure, because I hear this kind of piece here, but there folks need to pay their taxes. They need to make need to pay all the things that they paid before. And when you have that house there, this can be particularly difficult. And so I just want to be sure that we're not just saying, just go over to VEEP, and then because your income level was at a certain level, you're not able to get assistance or help, and you fall between the cracks. And so I'm just hoping that staff is looking at that and making sure that those folks who have, in a sense, contributed to our either via renting for several years or by owning a property in the city of Bloomington are not falling through the cracks and not able to pay their taxes, and so we're just paying attention to what's going on and make sure that we can't help everybody, but I want to be sure that we are making every effort to be able to be sure that those folks are not falling through those cracks in our community.
And Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Lohman, I think that your point is a good one, is that the city can't provide direct assistance for individuals, but we do certainly act as a referral, a source of referral to agencies that can. What I will do, council member, is inquire with our staff if they are aware of inquiries that are coming in and identifying if there are any of those that we are not able to match up with necessary services, whether it's because of any income eligibility or other reasons of access. We'll look into that further.
Council, additional questions? Dr. Kelly, I have a question for you. You mentioned it, that we're moving into undoubtedly a dangerous time of year just because of the shorter days, the colder days, people inside more, and combining all of that with the fact that COVID-19 fatigue is real. People are tired and are frustrated, and this has been going on for a long time, and it's weighing heavy on a lot of folks. It's a source of stress, immense stress for a lot of people. What suggestions does the CDC recommend, or the Minnesota Department of Health? What do they recommend to deal with this COVID fatigue, with this COVID stress, especially now, as I said, as we're heading into both literally and figuratively a very dark time of year?
Mr. Mayor, one of the best recommendations they provide is acknowledge it, talk about it, think about how you overcome that. And a lot of that deals with how Dr. Ryan was talking about his daily life. He's under tremendous pressure and stress, heading the World Health Organization, driving this process forward. That's akin to somebody that's lost a job or had their income dramatically change or lost a loved one, or dealing with long-term complications from COVID. Taking every day as a new day is one of the strategies they recommend. Focusing on the things you have control over that you can change. A lot of that deals with your attitude, your outlook, your perspective. And then the acts of gratitude people can do have tremendous impact. Being kind and caring to others can have quite a big benefit to individuals struggling with the challenge of the fatigue of COVID. I understand it is real. It is a hard thing to think about, this not having a defined endpoint in a process. That's why it's oftentimes easier to take one day at a time and think about the light at the end of the tunnel, what we're going to do in the spring, what we're going to do in the fall as things change.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that advice and those suggestions. We also, I know, on a national level, Dr. Kelly, a former colleague of yours, was just recently appointed at a high level. And did you want to talk at all about the direction moving forward at a national level with that Minnesota influence that is on the new panel?
Yeah. So as Mr. Mayor, as the process for a presidential transition continues to move forward, a panel was put together of experts, which includes Dr. Osterholm from the U of M and many other esteemed colleagues from around the country that are going to help guide the transition team and provide a path forward for the national COVID strategy. That team has a very challenging job ahead of them. The next 70 some odd days are going to be very challenging in the country. And so the team is going to inherit based on our current trajectory, a country with about 200 to 250,000 new cases a day, along with a vaccine that is likely going to be close to authorized or already authorized, and trying to get the public to move forward with that vaccine as a strategy and a tool to help control COVID. So they have a tall order in place, but they are some of the best minds in public health, healthcare, and I know they're up to the task, and I'm looking forward to seeing the plan that they produce and how we can turn our COVID response around. We have many examples of countries around the world that have done a phenomenal job managing COVID, and I look forward to seeing that.
I think we all do. Council, any additional questions? Councilmember Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nick, you mentioned that you know that there are folks who, for lack of a better phrase, are not getting tested for fear of a positive result and not being able to work. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about a little bit more about that and how you know that, and specifically how that applies to the community right here in Bloomington.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Coulter, we know that from talking to community members, partners, and doing our contact investigations. And so one of the things we're hearing loud and clear is individuals may have been exposed or know that they were exposed and are symptomatic and have a high degree of suspicion that they have COVID, but they are working and maybe the primary breadwinner for their family and don't have options through their work to take time off to not be there while they're sick. And so that is resulting in individuals working while they're sick. That means it's continuing to spread, and oftentimes it's an apartment complex, and they're potentially in their workplace. That's one of the things we're seeing is the small social gatherings or the small family neighbor interactions are having quite a large contribution to the spread of COVID right now in Bloomington. And so knowing that those things are there and the challenges and some of the limitations of if I don't work for this period of time and I can't because I'm quarantined because I had a positive test result, puts a challenging financial hardship on an already challenging situation.
Thank you. And then the other thing, I guess, is just more in the nature of comment. I appreciate your thoughts on the actions, frankly, that we as a city council can take. And I think it really, really is important to talk about the things we can do and the options that we have as far as being a policy-making body for the city of Bloomington to address not just sort of the virus itself, but the realities of what it means for sort of everyday life in Bloomington. So thank you.
Councilmember Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify a point, excuse me, that was made earlier, specifically about VEEP. And I just want to make sure that anybody that might be listening knows that there are no income restrictions for resources, food resources at VEEP. So anybody can pick up food there. There are, of course, income restrictions with the emergency rent assistance. And I think Councilmember Lohman's point was around like mortgage assistance or, other kinds of resources. But I just want to make it very clear that anybody that is having a hard time making ends meet can access resources, food resources at VEEP.
Thank you for that clarification, Councilmember Carter. Council, anything else for Dr. Kelly?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just real quickly.
Mr. Verbrugge.
Nick, you had mentioned that there may be some dialing back. I know the state of Minnesota has used a dial as the visual representation for where we have been in terms of various restrictions. Do you have any indication at this point what we may be talking about as they revisit the dial?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, council members, the indication is basically what many of you have probably already seen in the news, that the governor is looking at potentially a more targeted dial back that could potentially impact restaurants, bars, gyms, places where we've seen a lot of community spread in the last several weeks. So I don't know exactly where he's going to go with it, but that more targeted approach backfilled with some additional financial support to help those industries get through the process is one of the recommendations that's been talked about quite a bit in public health. And that seems to be the direction the governor's heading in.
And I believe the governor's press conference is it 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon? I think that's what I read. So, yeah, so we'll know by late afternoon tomorrow. Council, is there anything else? Seeing none, I want to thank you, Dr. Kelly. Thanks for your work on this. Recently, obviously, I know you've been putting in a lot of hours, and it's been a lot of stress and a lot of work. I appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you've been doing, frankly, since March, when this all started to break down and come down on all of our heads in ways that we never imagined. I appreciate the work that you do and the work that our entire public health team does with the contact tracing, the guidance, and the direction that you're giving the city. I greatly appreciate it. So thanks so much for your work, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor.
With that, we will move on to item 2.2 on our agenda for our special meeting tonight. And that is the survey results from our 2020 residence survey. Diane Kirby, who has been spearheading the residence survey, I think since we started it 9 years ago. Have you not? I believe you've been leading the charge on this since then. And so you're going to lead us through, go through some of the results, comparing this year with previous years, and I know with some of our peer cities nationwide. So good evening and welcome. Thanks much for being here.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and good evening, Mayor and City Council. It is my pleasure tonight to present you with the results of the 2020 National Community Survey of Bloomington residents. And yes, Mayor, you are correct. We have been conducting that survey since 2012, and I have been spearheading it every year since then. So I am going to go ahead and pull up my survey. And we'll pull up the PowerPoint, I believe.
You are good to go.
One. Good to go. All right. So let's dive in and talk about the resident survey. The survey is actually conducted by the National Research Center out of Boulder, Colorado. They've been conducting this survey, as I said, for the last 9 years here in Bloomington. It is a random sample scientific survey conducted by mail with an online component. This year, it's 3,300 households were randomly selected to participate in the survey. The polling took place this year between July 31st, September 15th. The time of year is significant. I'll talk about that in a minute. We had 978 respondents who completed the survey for a 30% response rate. And the margin of error was plus or minus 3% with a 95% confidence level. We had a number of add-on options that are listed here. They included a geographic cross-tabulation of responses by council district and demographic cross-tabulation of responses by gender, race, ethnicity, age, whether the respondents rented or owned their household, and annual household income. Now, let's talk about that survey environment. This survey was conducted in the backdrop of a lot of other things going on, not only in this community, but throughout the nation and around the world. And of course, number one, there was the global pandemic. Because the pandemic was going on at the time we conducted the survey, normally we conduct the survey in the May and June timeframe, but we were undergoing a shutdown at the time statewide. We also felt like we needed some time to let the dust settle a little bit for people to understand what the impact of the pandemic was having on their household, on their finances, et cetera. So as a result of that, we decided to push back that polling time frame into the August, mid-September time. Other things going on throughout this year that may have influenced survey results were the financial crisis brought on by the pandemic and the racial unrest and protests over the spring and summer. Now, pushing back the survey to late or early fall also placed the polling closer to the presidential election. And we noticed back in 2016 that the presidential election seemed to influence our survey results. The city received its most negative results back in 2016. So we weren't sure how or if this year's general election might influence our results. One of the most valuable attributes of the National Community Survey is that it allows jurisdictions to benchmark its results against a nationwide database of communities. There are more than 500 jurisdictions in the National Research Center's database. We receive comparisons for how we rank against those jurisdictions on all the questions. You'll note there's a clustering of jurisdictions in Minnesota. Well, we also choose to rank Bloomington against a group of high-performing peer cities for custom comparisons. There are 20 cities in that peer city comparison group. They include 5 cities in Minnesota: Eden Prairie, Edina, Maple Grove, Plymouth, and Woodbury. So in 2020, there were 116 items for which comparisons are available. 67 ratings were similar to 2019. The 25 areas increased. They received higher ratings, and that's an 8-fold increase from 2019. And we saw 24 ratings decrease, statistically significant decrease. The national benchmark comparisons this year were very favorable. 26 categories had higher or much higher ratings than the national benchmark in 2020, an increase from last year. Higher ratings included areas such as snow removal, drinking water, street repair, land use planning and zoning, and other areas. There were only 3 areas rated lower than the national benchmark, and they were the economy's impact on household income, the priority given to the design of Bloomington's residential and commercial areas, and residents' connection and engagement with their community. So let's go over the first key finding from this year's survey. Respondents continue to view Bloomington's quality of life very favorably. When asked about their quality of life, 88% of respondents rated it as excellent or good. This is 2% higher than last year's rating, and it scores in the upper 1/3 of the national benchmark. Residents in districts 1, 2, and 3 all gave higher marks in the 89 to 91% range than those living in District 4, which came in at 80%. Respondents who identified as white scored quality of life higher at 90% than those who identified as Hispanic and or another race at 79%. Bloomington as a place to live remained steady at 92% this year, as did your community neighborhood as a place to live at 86%. Overall image or reputation of Bloomington remained virtually unchanged at 79%. Now, you may remember that the City Council's strategic goal for community image is actually 85%. We have yet to reach that goal in the community survey. The percent of people who said they would remain in Bloomington for the next 5 years remained stable from 2019 at 85%. And those who would recommend Bloomington at 92%, that's up slightly from last year's score. Scores for Bloomington as a place to raise children came in at 85%, relatively stable from last year's rating. The satisfaction rating for Bloomington as a place to retire grew significantly by 7% to 74%. This was an area that had seen a noticeable decline last year. 67% was actually the lowest rating ever given for this category. So this year's 74% approval rating is good enough to rank it in the top 1/3 of jurisdictions in the national benchmark. Bloomington as a place to visit came in at 76% within the top 1/3 of jurisdictions nationwide. Our next key finding from this year's survey is that residents continue to identify safety as an important focus area for the city. But public safety is one area where we did see slippage in the scores from 2019 to 2020. The overall feeling of safety dropped by 6% from 87% in 2019 to 81% in 2020. Council District 4 saw the lowest scores at 68%. Respondents with household incomes less than $25,000, women, and those who identified as Hispanic and or another race also reported lower satisfaction ratings for overall feeling of safety. Feeling safe in your neighborhood during the day held steady at 96%. And feeling safe in Bloomington's commercial areas during the day actually increased by 5% to 92% in 2020. When it comes to public safety services, ratings for police services, crime prevention, and fire services all dropped in 2020. Police services dropped 5% to 85% in 2020, its lowest mark since the survey began in 2012. Council District 4 came in with the lowest score at 79%. On the flip side, homeowners, along with those who have lived in Bloomington more than 20 years, those who are over age 55, were male, and earned more than $100,000 per year, provided the highest rating for its police services. Crime prevention also decreased by 5 points, garnering 79% excellent or good ratings, but it still landed in the top 1/3 of jurisdictions in the national benchmark. Fire services was 5% lower in 2020 from an all-time high of 97% in 2019. Our next key finding from this year's survey: Bloomington's economy continues to garner high ratings among residents. However, respondents did share concerns this year about their personal finances. A number of ratings within economy were higher than ratings observed in the national benchmark, including Bloomington as a place to work, overall quality of Bloomington's businesses and services, which ranked number 23 in the national database of jurisdictions. Shopping opportunities ranked 34 nationally. Employment opportunities ranked 21 nationally. Vibrancy of shopping areas and cost of living also were higher than the national benchmark. Most scores in the area of the economy have remained stable over time, although shopping opportunities did drop by 7% from 2019 to 2020. This question asked respondents what impact the economy would have on their family income in the next 6 months. And I'm sorry, that one's not pulling up. But that one, in that particular one, 15%, the impact would be very or somewhat positive. That is lower than last year's ratings and lower than the nationwide benchmark. 1 in 3 of those polled responded that the impact would be somewhat or very negative. There was no significant difference in the council districts on this question, and respondents who identified as Hispanic and or other race were more positive on this question than those who identified as white. Males were also much more positive than females on this question. In the area of community design, the score for the overall design and layout of Bloomington's residential and commercial areas was virtually unchanged at 75% in 2020. And with a 69% approval rating, the variety of housing options in Bloomington ranked among the top 20% of cities in the nationwide benchmark. When it came to the availability of affordable quality housing, 48% of respondents gave it a score of excellent or good. This was high enough to rank it in the top 1/3 of jurisdictions in the NRC's nationwide database and place it number 4 among our peer cities. Council District number 3 had the lowest score in this area of 39%. Respondents under age 35, making less than $25,000 per year, and living here 5 years or less were the most negative on this particular question. In the category of built environment, new development earned excellent or good ratings from 63% of respondents. That's down slightly from last year's score of 65%. Well-designed neighborhoods is a new question this year. That came in at 72%. And the overall appearance of Bloomington dropped 5% from 2019, from 81% to 76%. The score was similar to other communities in the national benchmark. Within the governance area, there was a lot of good news here. We observed a number of increases in the ratings in this area. A strong majority of respondents positively rated the services provided by the city. The value of services for taxes paid shot up 7% in 2020, receiving excellent or good ratings from 70% of respondents. Not only did the ratings increase here, but this score also placed Bloomington higher than the benchmark of jurisdictions nationwide. In fact, Bloomington is in the top 10% of jurisdictions nationwide with this score. Respondents are feeling very favorably about the value of services for the taxes they pay in Bloomington compared to other communities. On overall direction that Bloomington is taking, the score of 70% held steady from 2019. This placed Bloomington in the top 25% of jurisdictions nationwide. And when it comes to the city's overall customer service, a rating of 86% is 4% higher than 2019. This places Bloomington in the top 20% of communities in the national database, and it also exceeds the City Council's customer service goal of 85% within the strategic priority of high-quality service delivery, the first time the city has exceeded this goal. All of these city government scores were similar to within the margin of error or higher than last year's scores. I also want to point out that the following scores were in the top 1/4 of jurisdictions in the National Research Center's national database. Those were generally acting in the best interest of the community, being honest, overall confidence in city government, treating all residents fairly and the job Bloomington does at welcoming resident involvement. Services provided by Bloomington was in the top 1/3 nationwide. And several other categories are new this year, so there aren't good benchmarks for those yet. Ratings for city services were generally higher from a year ago. Some of the more notable improvements included preservation of natural areas, which rose 6% from 2019. Animal control increased by 7% from 2019 to 82% in 2020. Utility billing was up by 5% to 80% from 2019. And sidewalk maintenance grew 4% from 2019 to 68% in 2020. Scores for the city services listed here were comparable to the national benchmarks with the exception of natural areas preservation, animal control, and land use planning and zoning. All three placed higher than the national benchmark. Land use planning and zoning actually ranked number 25 in the nationwide database and 5th in the peer group of cities. And our next key finding from the 2020 resident survey, residents are feeling more positively about services in the mobility area. And all of these categories ranked higher than other communities in the national benchmark. Street repair in particular is really kind of a Cinderella story. 60%, that score is up 14% from 2019. The lowest score ever was 36% in 2014. The high point was 57% in 2016. This is an area that really rebounded this year, and it's very possible that the time of year that the survey was conducted really helped out this category. Typically, when we conduct a survey in the spring, especially if it's been a difficult and a long winter, there tend to be more potholes around the time that we're conducting the survey. So this was later in the year. That may have helped out these scores. The other thing to point out is that this category actually scored higher than the national benchmark of other cities this year. So a real turnaround for that area. In the area of snow removal, 82% score. That's a 5% jump from last year, higher than the national benchmarks. Also moved up in the rankings from number 32 of all jurisdictions in 2019 to number 25 in 2020. And it also ranked number 4 in the peer cities comparisons. And when it comes to street cleaning, that grew by 7% to 80% in 2020. That was good enough to place it in the top 20% of jurisdictions nationwide. In other mobility-related categories, ease of travel by car in Bloomington grew by 11% in 2020, coming in at 86% excellent or good. That score is higher than the national benchmark. Bloomington ranked 32 in the national comparisons and number 2 in the peer cities comparisons. When it comes to ease of walking in Bloomington, that increased by 3% to 74% this year. And ease of travel by bicycle in Bloomington rose by 6% from 2019, landing at 65% in 2020. That was good enough to place it in the top 1/3 of jurisdictions nationwide and place it fourth among Bloomington's peer cities. Utilities is an area where Bloomington has traditionally done very well in the National Community Survey, and it continues to do so this year. Bloomington's drinking water remains very popular. The 2020 rating of 91% is tied for all-time high rating. That's higher than the national benchmark. It moved from number 5 among all jurisdictions nationwide in 2019 to number 3 in 2020, and number 1 against our peer cities. Stormwater management, after dropping by 5% in 2019, this category not only regained lost ground, but kept going, coming in at 87%, an increase of 12% from last year. Came in at number 4 nationwide and number 1 in the peer cities comparisons. And sewer services increased by 3% over 2019. It ranked number 10 in the national comparisons and number 2 amongst our peer cities. When it comes to other utility-related services, the scores for all of the services shown here in 2020. Garbage collection received excellent or good ratings from 80% of respondents, a 3% increase from 2019. Recycling scores increased by 7% over 2019 to 84% in 2020. And yard waste pickup ratings grew by 9% from 77% in 2019 to 86% in 2020. Moving on to the category of health and wellness, many of the scores in this area remain stable from 2019. I want to note, though, that of that all of the categories came in the top 30% of jurisdictions nationwide in this area. I also want to note that while the availability of affordable quality mental health care came in at 63% excellent or good, that score actually places it higher than the national benchmark, and it puts Bloomington in the top 15% of jurisdictions nationwide. When asked to rate their own health, and I have a pie chart for this one, and for some reason it is also not showing up here. When asked to rate their own health, 69% of respondents stated that they were in very good or good health, and that is very encouraging given the pandemic. One of the ways residents are staying healthy is by taking advantage of the city's parks and open spaces. 89% of respondents rated the overall quality of parks and recreation opportunities in Bloomington as excellent or good. 84% of residents were pleased with the availability of paths and walking trails, up 8% from 2019. And recreational opportunities remained stable at 79% for the 6th year in a row. The ratings for city parks dropped slightly to 89% this year. Recreation programs or classes remained relatively stable in 2020 at 78%. And 71% of respondents rated recreation centers or facilities as excellent or good. Now, all of these scores are similar to the national benchmarks. However, the ratings for recreation centers placed Bloomington at number 13 out of the 15 peer cities that asked this particular question. In the area of inclusivity and engagement, while many of these ratings remain steady, several dropped by 4 percentage points or more this year. Opportunities to volunteer from 73% in 2019 down to 69% in 2020. Opportunities to participate in community matters dropped from 68% in 2019 to 64% in 2020. And openness and acceptance of the community toward people of diverse backgrounds dropped from 67% in 2019 to 61% in 2020. There are also several custom questions on inclusivity and engagement that I will review with you in just a few minutes. Another pie chart that's not showing up here, the community in Bloomington stayed the same in 2020 with 62% stating that it was excellent or good. Now, this ties with last year's rating of lowest ever in the 9 years that we've conducted this survey. Demographically, those who have lived here 5 years or less, renters that earn more than $100,000 per year and are younger than age 35 responded more negatively. Geographically, respondents residing in Council District 4 were the most negative at 55%. In the education, arts, and culture category, overall opportunities for education, culture, and the arts scored 79% excellent or good ratings, down slightly from 2019. Community support for the arts received a score of 72%, and nearly 3/4 of respondents scored K through 12 education in Bloomington as excellent or good. This is down, though, by 8% from 81% in 2019. Respondents in Council District 4 were among the most negative on this category at 55%. Finally, there were 3 custom questions on this year's survey of the Council's choosing. They were related to community inclusivity, the impacts of COVID-19, and city priorities. This first question covered residents' perception of community inclusivity. The question was, how welcoming, if at all, do you think your community is to the following groups? Nearly all respondents thought that the community was very or moderately welcoming to people who identify as white. 86% also said that the community was welcoming to people who are Asian Indian, or Pacific Islander, with 74% for people who are Hispanic or Latino. 65% thought the community was very or moderately welcoming to people who are Black or African American. 75% said it was welcoming to people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or other non-straight sexual identities. 62% said that people whose first language isn't English were welcomed by this community. And 64% said that people who identify as transgender were welcomed, very welcomed, or moderately welcomed in this community. And 61% of respondents said that the community was very or moderately welcoming to people who are Arabic or Middle Eastern or people who are not U.S. citizens. This next question asked how much of a priority, if at all, should it be for the City of Bloomington to focus on each of the following areas. Addressing social, economic, and racial equity differences in education came in at 86% of a high or moderate priority. 86% said criminal justice system should be a moderate or high priority when it comes to addressing social, economic, and racial equity differences. The area of health came in at 85% and housing at 83%. Creating a diverse, inclusive, and fair community came in at 86% high or moderate priority. Addressing social, economic, and racial equity differences in jobs came in at 85%. Recruiting diverse people into leadership and local government came in at 78%. And hiring more diverse staff came in at 78% high or moderate priority. This final question focused on the impact of COVID-19 on Bloomington's households. It asked respondents to rate how much of a problem, if at all, these issues were for them. Loss of employment income was a major or moderate problem for 26% of respondents. 26% also reported that loss of income from retirement savings was a major or moderate problem. The lack of paid sick leave from their employer was a major or moderate problem for 18% of respondents. And the loss of housing was a major or moderate problem for 1 in 10 respondents. So that's a look at the survey results, but I wanted to mention one more thing. I wanted to take a moment to recognize that Bloomington was the recent recipient of a Voice of the People Award for Excellence in Online Engagement. The award was sponsored by the International City Managers Association and POCO NRC, and it recognized the city's use of POCO's online polling platform to gauge resident opinion about the impacts of COVID-19 on the city's budget and their own households. And this online polling platform was utilized at a time when opportunities for in-person engagement were just very, very limited. And then there's just one more stat that I want to share with you, and that's the percent of people who have watched a local public meeting online or on television in the past 12 months in Bloomington. 36% of respondents reported that they had watched a local meeting in the last year. That placed Bloomington higher than the benchmark, the national benchmark of communities. In fact, we ranked number 23 nationwide and number 1 amongst our peer cities. So that's a summary of the results from the 2020 National Community Survey of Bloomington residents. So what's next for the survey results? Well, we are already starting to post some of the results on social media. We are producing a video for next week's Bloomington Today and posting the video to YouTube. We're planning an article in the December briefing, and today we posted all of the survey reports on the city's website. Use keywords survey, resident survey, to find all of those reports. So with that, I will take questions from council.
Thank you, Ms. Kirby. A lot of information there, and I know there is a lot more on the website. Found the page and looking at the page right here from the National Community Survey. Yep. A lot of information, a lot of comparison trends over time, the community livability report, and much, much more. So I'd encourage anybody with any kind of interest, or if you want more information or more details on this, it's out there. So please do go take a look and check it out and see if you have any additional questions. And if so, please bring them forward. We'd love to hear them.
Absolutely.
Council, any questions for Ms. Kirby? Councilmember Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me, just one, and I'm not sure you'll actually be able to answer it, but I'll try it anyway. In terms of transportation, I noticed there was, I think it was a 10-point drop in the overall rating of, and I closed the thing now, so I don't even remember how it's phrased, but the sort of the overall rating of the transportation system generally in Bloomington. But it seems like there are increases, or at very least no change in like the specifics. So I'm finding that those to be a little bit at odds with each other, and I'm wondering if you have any ideas as to why that might be the case.
I think that actually that particular question comes under the category of, there's a standard question on the NCS that talks about how much of a priority these different areas should be, and I think that particular question actually appears in an area about how residents would rank the priority of various things like housing, transportation system, those sorts of things. So I think that's why you're seeing a little bit of a difference between the two, a little bit of a disconnect between the two.
Other questions? So, Ms. Kirby, the question that I've received, at least from a couple of people, is, and I've heard in the past as well, is people see the results of this survey. They see the respondents' results over the period of time. And the thing I hear from so many people is, well, they never called me. So that can't be a legitimate number. They never called me. I never talked to anybody about snow plowing, the parks, transportation, or whatever it is. So could you please repeat at least one more time just regarding the validity of this survey, the statistical validity of this survey, even though only 3,300 households responded, the validity, the scientific and the official validity of the numbers that we're seeing here.
Right. So this is a statistically valid scientific survey. They select every nth household. So they have a scientific method for how they select households. And those are the ones that are selected to receive the surveys every year. They also tend to oversample multifamily unit housing because they find that it is more difficult to reach people who are typically renting. So apartment buildings tend to be oversampled so that they can reach those groups that are harder to reach. So they can say with a 95% confidence level that this is how people are feeling across the community based on the fact that this is a scientific sampling of the community.
And I will freely admit that statistics have never been my strong point. In fact, I tell the story how my statistics professor in graduate school liked me so much he asked me to take his class again. So statistics are not my thing, but I do know that this is statistically significant and an accurate survey, and appreciate that explanation and the explanation given by the National Community Survey folks, who I know work very hard on this and put a lot of effort into making sure that it is legitimate and reflects the community at large. Councilmember Lohman, question.
Mayor, as you asked that question, something occurred to me, and I figured I would go and ask it this way. Diane, when you're just looking at the demographic data, did we see, and you pointed out a couple of things that were there, but, to that point, I'm getting emails and people are saying, hey, on the social media, we're not seeing that kind of dissatisfaction, but, I'm talking to my neighbors and I see some dissatisfaction out there. Are we seeing certain segments, sort of like what we did, I think it was last year, we had sent out a survey that was non-scientific, and we were able to determine that there were, you have to correct me if there's so many things we're doing, I can't keep all these things straight, but I thought there was a certain segment of the population who had been living here longer at a certain age range or something, had said that they had some dissatisfaction and that non-scientific survey. Did we see any of that correlation between that report that we saw last year and this year? Are we seeing some demographic trends there? Could you talk a little bit about some of those places where we need to kind of put our focus or bright light on that?
Still digging through those results, Councilmember Lohman. So in terms of comparing last year to this year, we'd have to take a look and dig out those both the demographic and the geographic comparisons just to see where there are tend to be more dissatisfaction. I would say, just looking in the areas that I did for this presentation, I would say that they were fairly consistent from what I recall from last year or similar areas. So I don't know that I was seeing necessarily a major shift in terms of certain groups being more dissatisfied or more satisfied. It seems fairly consistent, but we'll have to take a deeper look into the survey results.
And Diane, I want to be sure that when you're looking, I'm not talking about from year to year survey. I'm talking about that off survey that we did. Maybe the manager knows what I'm talking about, but it seemed like we did some, so I think we had one result from our survey, and then we saw a different result from this non-scientific survey. And that's the piece I'm really interested to see if there's any trends that we're seeing in that, even though it's not really scientific, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, council members, Councilmember Lohman, I think if I'm recalling correctly, you may be referring to the survey that we did by Decision Resource, actually the Morris Leatherman group, when we were looking at community amenities in the community center. And that happened about 2 months before our annual resident survey. So we had both of them to compare, and we had some differing numbers in there. We can go back and take a look at that. Again, that one's now about 18 months old. Is that right, Diane? Because we did that, I think, in March of last year.
It was early in the year.
Any other questions, Councilmember Lohman, on that one?
I've got plenty of questions, but you know what? Let's move on.
Very good. Councilmember Beloga.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Diane. Just like the mayor, I've been getting numbers of questions about I didn't take the survey. I've never taken a survey. I've lived here for 10, 20, 30 years or more. And are we, just for the record, people kind of say, well, 3,300 households. And if you do that on a rolling basis, we should be through there. And one of those 10 years or 9 years, I should have been sampled, but I haven't. So can you talk to that a bit to the community? Again,
Yes,
I will go with the mayor and say that, statistics aren't my strength either. So,
Ms. Kirby?
Yeah,
although I
yeah.
did eke out the class, my instructor didn't like me as much as the mayor's.
Ms. Kirby?
Thank you for asking, Councilmember Beloga. Again, it's a matter of how they select the households. Like I said, they select every nth household. It could be that some households get oversampled, some maybe undersampled. At the end of the day, though, that they can say with some assurance that this is how the community is feeling based on the survey results because of how they are sampling the community.
Yeah, the selections of the address are truly randomized, so they don't go through. I think Councilmember Beloga, to one of the questions that your constituents might have, they don't kind of make sure that they have everybody in that pool. It's not a rotational thing. It truly is a randomized. However, I don't know how they do the randomized selection of homes, but it's based on all of the addresses, and it's whatever the formula is that selects them. We do also provide an opportunity for people who want to take the survey to opt into the survey. We put it on the website. That is not a scientifically valid sample, but it also provides us additional information. Those numbers are not included in the presentation that you had tonight. Diane, do you want to talk a little bit about the online survey results?
Yes, I will. Jamie, actually, we had over 950 respondents to the online survey. It was open for about a month. And actually, that's the most we've ever received for the opt-in survey. So we promoted it via social media and on the website. Anybody could opt in. So if somebody's never taken the survey before, this was their opportunity to go ahead and take it. Looking at the survey results just generally, somewhat consistent. You'll see a little bit more negative, I would say, ratings on those results. But again, those are not a random sample, and they were self-selected in terms of whether they chose to participate or not.
Council, any additional questions, comments? Councilmember Beloga?
Could ask one follow-up question, Diane.
Please.
And I think you answered, but I'd just like to have it so that the public hears. They do not use the same call list or send list for each year. Thank you.
Councilmember Beloga, you are correct. They do not use the same mailing list from year to year. Correct.
Any other questions? If not, I'll remind people again that the entire survey results have been posted online as of today. We have been talking about them. They've been trickling out on social media. Been talking about them each week in the council minute that we record and just teasing out some information and getting some details out there. So the information is there. If you have questions on it, please do go to the city website, take a look, or take a look at social media and just see some of the details, some of the more, as I said, the teaser stuff or some of the things to bring you into more information, which is available on the website and online. Council, anything else on this? Diane, thank you so very much, and pass our thanks on to the folks at the National Community Survey for once again providing us with this good information. It's a very useful tool. Thank you so much.
I will do that, and I will remind you that we are going to get the reports very soon for the National Business Survey of Bloomington businesses.
Very good.
We should have that in about a week.
Thank you for that reminder. That's good. I look forward to seeing those
soon.
results as well. That'll be very interesting, especially this year. Those are our 2 agenda items for our special meeting this evening. Council, the WebEx login that you had is the same WebEx login that will lead us into the regular council meeting. So we have about 25 minutes before we start our 7 o'clock meeting. If you want to turn off your cameras and microphones and stretch your legs or get another cup of tea, please do so. But we will reconvene the official business meeting of the Bloomington City Council at the top of the hour at 7 o'clock.